Hey, what's up YouTube? This is Coxie1979, old school gamer, and today we are going to be starting our part 1 of a tutorial series we're going to be doing in Unity 5. It's going to be very basic to start with. We're just going to go through the interface of Unity 5 itself, and just go through some of the real basic things, then work our way up to the more advanced stuff like scripting and things like that later on in the series. Later on in the series we're going to be using a little bit of Blender to do some very basic 3D modeling, because I am not a 3D modeler by any stretch of the imagination, but we can make some basic buildings and things like that in Blender and import them into Unity, which is quite handy to learn if you're going to be building a game or making a game. So first things first, go online and find Unity 5 and download it for free. If you haven't done that, do it now. And yeah, I have it on my computer, so once you've got it, just double click and open it up. And as you can see, these are the projects I've been working on. Just click on start a new project, and I'm just going to call mine FPS tutorial. And as you can see, the location is already been selected for mine because that's the location I save my projects in. So just click here and find a folder on your computer, or make a new one where you're going to save your projects. Make sure it's somewhere you can find it very easily, so you can find it very easily in the future. Make sure 3D is selected. It should be selected by default, but if it's not, make sure you click on 3D and then create project. And bam, there we go, we're in Unity 5. As you can see, I'll just go through a few of the very basic stuff. I'm not going to go over everything, I'm just going to go over some basic interface just to get you started if you haven't used Unity before. If you have, well, you probably don't want to watch this video, but too bad, because some people haven't actually used Unity before, so I'm just going to explain some of the very basic things on the interface. So first of all, as you can see, we have this huge screen in the middle by default, and this is our scene. And our scene is basically where we can add things that are going to be in our game. And as you can see, there's two things in our scene already that just starts off by default. And on the left hand side here where it says hierarchy, we have main, camera and directional light. Everything in the hierarchy is what is actually in our scene or in our game. So if you click on the main camera, you can see it selects the main camera, and you get a little preview of what the main camera is looking at, which at the moment is not much because there's nothing in the scene. Click on that one, and that's our directional light. If we didn't have the directional light, you wouldn't be able to see anything. So yes, we definitely need to have some light in the scene. As you can see, when I've clicked on these two different things, the camera and the directional light, this changes over here, and this is called our inspector. And the inspector basically gives you details of the object, or the camera, light, whatever you have selected, and it will give you the position of that object, the rotation, and the scale. So the scale is the size, the rotation, you can turn it around all different directions, and position is the position of this object in 3D space. Okay, we won't get into too much detail about that, but just so you know, that's the inspector window. We will be using it a lot, so you will sort of pick this stuff up as we go along. Down here is our assets, and our assets folder is where we will import all the things that we're going to use in our game. For example, our 3D models like houses and weapons and things like that, enemies, scripts, textures, materials, heaps of different things we're going to have in our assets folder. And another thing that's probably very handy to know from the start is these two here. We have scene, which is this view here that we can move around in and add things to our game. And then if I click on the game, this is actually what you would see, this is what the camera sees in the game right now. So if you were to play the game, you would pretty much just see this, which is a sky and some brown default color of Unity. This actually isn't ground, it's just nothing. As I said, it's just a default color that Unity starts off with. So click back to scene, and I'll just go through a couple of the controls, or a few of the controls that are going to allow you to move around in 3D space. The first one we're going to use is the mouse scroll wheel. So if we roll the scroll wheel forward, we zoom in. If we roll it back, we zoom out. If you click and hold the mouse scroll in, you get that little hand icon, and we can move our mouse and pan around in 3D space. Another one is right mouse button. If we click and hold that, you get the eye icon, and this will allow us to look around in 3D space like that. You can also use your up, down, left and right arrow keys. See, I go left, I can go right and go forward and back, which is really quite useful. And that's pretty much all we need to know for the moment. We also have some little buttons up here. The hand icon is just the pan that I was using before. You don't really need to select that. I don't know why people click on that and use it, because just say you're in this one here, you just push your mouse scroll in and it's exactly the same anyway. The hand comes up. Okay, so don't really worry about clicking on that, going up there and manually clicking it. Just push your mouse scroll in and move around like that. Unless you're on a Mac or something like that, I suppose it might be handy, but I don't use Macs because I don't like them. So yeah, you won't hear me explaining how to do all the stuff on a Mac because I don't use one ever. This one here is rotate, and as you can see, we get these. I'll explain this here first on the 4 arrows. As you see, when you click the 4 arrows here, we get these colored arrows here. We get a green one, a blue one, and a red one. I'll just move around like this so I can explain it a bit better. So it's straight on. And if you look up here, you can see that we have the green, which is Y, then we have the red, which is X, and then we have blue, which is actually facing the other way now. You can't see it because it's facing straight out that way on here, and that's the Z axis. So I'll move it like that so you can see it. There you go. See, there's the Z axis there. So these are very, very handy tools, because if you try moving something around in 3D space, depending on what view you're looking at the object from, it may not end up exactly where you think you've put it. So using these arrows, if I left click on the arrow and move it up and down, this will move the object directly up and down in a straight line. The same with the X. If I left click on the X arrow, move it left and right, and it goes in a straight line. Same as the Z. If I left click on the Z, move it forward and back in a straight line. This is very, very handy tool to use. This one here is rotate, as I said before, and you've got the same colors again. You've got your Y, you've got your X, which is red, and you've got Z, which is blue. So if I left click on the Y axis, I can rotate on the Y axis around like this. I can left click on the X and rotate up and down like this, and of course on the Z and rotate side to side like that. Okay, this is the only other one we're really going to be using, and this one here is to, oh my god, I just had a fucking brain fart. This is the size tool to resize things pretty much. So we're not going to really resize the camera, but you would use this to make things smaller and bigger. If I pulled it on the X-axis, I would stretch it out that way. Pull it this way, I'd stretch it out that way. And if I pulled the Y-axis up, I would just stretch it straight up. But you'll see this in more detail later on, because we'll be using these tools a lot. So for now, that's basically all we really need to know. So what we're going to do now with our scene here is we're actually going to bring in a terrain. So when we bring in our character controller, we have something for him or her to stand on. So to do this, it's very easy. You can see up here we have File, Edit, Assets, Game Object, Component, Window, and Help. We just want to click on Game Object and come down to 3D Object because we're making a 3D game, and come down here to Terrain. As you can see, I can't see it in my scene view because I've been moving around explaining some things to you guys. I'm actually looking at the camera. So if you ever get lost in 3D space, instead of trying to look around everywhere and find, oh, there it is over there, like that, and navigate around, the easiest way to find it is the terrain has now been added to our hierarchy because we've added it into the scene, and you just double click on that, and there you go, it's right in front of you. So now I can use the mouse wheel pushed in to pan, and then just zoom in a little bit with the mouse wheel as well, rolling it forward. And you can see that we just have a blank canvas that is white. So what we're going to do now is we want to add some kind of texture to this ground to actually make it look a little bit more like ground. So to do this, make sure we've got the terrain selected up here, as you can see, because in the inspector window it says terrain, and you've got a few options. There's nothing on the terrain really at the moment except this terrain collider. The terrain collider and all colliders basically will stop your character from walking through them. And if I didn't have a terrain collider on this terrain, when we put our character on top of the ground, he will just fall through it when we start the game, which is not ideal. Okay, so to put the texture on, you can see here we have a few of these little panels here. And we want to select the paintbrush here, so left click the paintbrush, and then if you come down here it says no terrain textures defined, because we don't actually have a texture, we have nothing. All we have in our assets folder is the terrain. Alright, so we need to get a texture. So to get a texture, the easiest way to get textures, I find, is to just go online, go to www.textures.com, which used to be CG Textures, but now they've changed their name, and you will have a massive variety of textures to choose from here. So as you can see on the left here, we have all these things. There's ground, so if we click on ground, we got gravel, ice, snow, wood chips, or you can just come up here to enter keywords. Just say we type in grass. We have 847 textures for grass, which isn't too bad at all. So just scroll and see which one you like. Don't have to use the same textures as me. I'm just doing this for like a demonstration kind of purpose. So you guys just pick whatever that you like. I'm not going to spend too much time with the texturing stuff. I'm just going to show you how to do it, and you can sort of stuff around with how you want. Okay, so I think maybe this one here looks alright, so I'll left click on that. As you can see, two images have come up. This one here, excuse me, under image 1, see how it says seamless? This is the texture you will want to use, alright? This one here doesn't say seamless. You do not, under any circumstances, want to put this texture on your terrain. The difference between seamless and just a normal texture is a texture will repeat itself over and over again. If I put this texture on the terrain, it will just keep repeating itself over and over again and join itself together until it covers the whole terrain. If it's not a seamless texture, you'll actually be able to see where the textures join onto each other, which is horrible. It just looks really bad, and you don't want to do that. So this one here, as you can see, the small one here is free. Alright, see? Free. Awesome. So just download that. As you can see, it's downloading down here. I'm going to get out of here. I'm going to go back to my desktop, and my things that I get off the internet will be in my downloads folder, and there it is there. So to bring this into Unity, once you've downloaded it onto your computer, just left click on it, drag it down here to Unity, and then into your assets folder. It'll take a second, and now we have it. Another way to bring textures and other things into Unity, I'll just delete that. Okay, is we can go up here to assets, and we can go import new asset. And as you can see, I have a texture folder with a lot of textures, but I'll go to downloads where the location of the one we downloaded was, and you can either double click on this or push import once you've selected it to bring it in. I'll just double click it and it will automatically bring it into Unity for you. Okay, great. Now we have our first texture. So go up here to terrain and click on terrain, and you'll see here no terrain textures defined again, and then it says edit textures. Left click edit textures, left click add texture, and we get this little box here. Now what we can do is we can either push select and it will show us the textures that are currently in our assets, and you see there our grass texture, or you can simply left click on the grass and just drag it into the first slot. Make sure you put in the first slot the one that says albedo. A normal map or a normal texture is completely different than this. A normal map actually will make the grass look more bumpier and realistic. It's a great thing to make, and we'll make some later on. You can use different free programs to make them, or you can just make them in Unity. But we won't do that just yet. Also, we have a couple of options. We have metallic, which we don't want because it's grass. Smoothness really just makes things look shinier. Well, that's how I see it. I don't know if it actually does anything else. It just, every time I adjust smoothness levels on textures, it just makes them a bit more shiny. Makes them look a bit more wet looking. It's quite handy for some things, but probably not going to use it for the grass. And then we have the size, how it's going to tile the texture on the X and Y. Yeah, so at the moment the size of the texture is 15 by 15. We can reduce this size to make it so they put this texture repeats itself more times on the terrain here, and when it repeats itself more times, it shrinks the texture down and it makes it look a bit more detailed, and the grass blades won't look so big. But for now, I'll just show you, and we'll leave it on 15 and 15, and we'll add it. And as you can see, we now have a texture on our terrain. There you go. You zoom in and you can see we have grass. If I click on edit textures again and then edit texture, it'll bring us back to this window because we're selected on, we only have one texture at the moment and we're selected on it. You can see the blue line underneath it. Let's change this size, say 5. As you can see, it's only changed it on one axis, so it's kind of made it a bit warped and weird. And then we'll change it on the other axis as well. And now if I zoom in, it kind of looks a bit better like that, I think. So we'll leave it at 5 and 5 for now. That should be fine. Just zoom out a bit. Right, now come down here because we're going to keep our assets folder and everything very neat and organized. So right click down here, go to create folder, and we're going to call this textures, and just left click on your grass and drag it into your textures folder. Excuse me. Okay, so now we have our terrain with the grass texture on it, which is pretty cool. So next thing we're going to do is we are going to add some hills or some mountains to the terrain. So to do that, all we do is we click this one here, which is raise and lower terrain. This one here, paint height, you can actually set the height that you want to raise it to, so when you raise the terrain it won't go any higher than the height you set. And this one here, smooth height, if you have jagged mountains and things like that, it will actually smooth them down for you when you hold the left mouse button and scroll over them. But for now we're just going to use this one, and you got the settings for it. You can use all different shapes and things like that. I'll just zoom in a bit so you can see, and you'll see that the blue marker changes depending on what shape I choose. I choose the star shape or these little shapes, and if I adjust my brush size to full, as you can see, it makes it a lot bigger. So you can adjust the size of the mountains you want. The opacity doesn't really matter for doing mountains and things like that. Opacity really is if you're putting a texture on top of another texture and you want to see the texture underneath. You can bring the opacity down so that you can apply a texture onto another texture and still see as much as you want, depending on how low you adjust the opacity to. So just say you had grass going into dirt, and you wanted it to look like the grass sort of blended in. It doesn't just look like there's grass and then all of a sudden it's just dirt. You sort of adjust the opacity down, and in between where the grass meets the dirt, you would put the texture on with a low opacity, and it will look like they kind of blend in together a bit nicer. Anyway, you'll see that later because we'll do it later. So for now, I am going to just left click, and as you can see, it's raised and made some little mountains. The more I hold the mouse button in, the higher the mountains go, okay? We can change this one. I'm just going to do this pretty random, and I'll use a couple more shapes. I'll do it here, just make it a bit like this, just raise it up a little bit. Okay, just like that. And as I said before, once you've done that, you can play around with this as much as you want. I don't want to take too friggin' long and bore everyone, but you can click the smoothness, and if I left click or hold down the left and run this over, it'll adjust the smoothness and take away the sharp, jagged tops and edges, so that your player can actually walk on most of the things. And however, you have this set over here is obviously how much you can do at once. So if I've got the big brush size on, it's a lot easier when you're working with large mountains like this. So I'm just going to smooth that down just like that. I don't want it to be too smooth. I don't want it to be too jagged. I'll just come over here. Just make sure I've done that a little bit. Okay. Alright, so we've kind of got some little mountains there, which is alright. Okay, so once we've done that, we are now going to put a texture on these mountains, because at the moment they've just got a grass texture on them, and it's pretty boring. We don't want that. We want to add another texture. So let's go back to CG textures, and maybe we'll type in cliffs. And we get all these options here. So what do I want to use for this? Maybe this one is like a blend of rock and grass, seeing that we've already got grass. It's rocky grass. So yeah, I think I might put this one on there. Okay, so as I said before, make sure you choose the seamless one. Do not pick any of these two. And then we'll just get the free one there and download it. And there it is. So I'll drag that into Unity. I could have just dragged that straight into my textures folder, or been in the textures folder and would have put it in there, but it doesn't matter. So what we need to do now is actually add this texture to the paintbrush. So you click the paintbrush, and there's our first texture. Go to Edit Texture, Add Texture, and then of course bring our new texture onto the albedo. And we'll leave this at a fairly big size just to start with and see how it looks. So just click Add, and make sure over here that so we've still got our first texture selected. Click on the new texture, so the blue lines underneath it, and then of course when I go over here and left mouse click, I can just hold it down and just paint this texture on my mountains. I'm doing this pretty messy. Usually you would spend a bit of time making sure that you get it all, not coming out onto the grass so much like I just did then. You can adjust your brush size, as I said before, and get some real fine details, zoom right in, and you can see what you're doing a bit better. But just for the sake of this tutorial, I'm just showing you guys. So yeah, so you've got that, and as I said before, what you can do, if you click back on your grass texture and see how the grass meets the rock down here, it doesn't really look right. So what you can do is you can click back on your grass and get your opacity maybe maybe just bring it down that much even, and I'll just bring the brush size down a little bit and just go around the edges. Doing this very rough, as I said. Usually you'd spend a bit of time and you can make it look really good. You can use as many different textures as you want to try to blend things in, and just play around with the opacity levels, and you can actually get things looking quite good, which this does not. Yeah, I don't mind that texture so much. It's alright. Alright, that'll do. Okay, so now we've got our mountains on there. What we're going to do now is add a first person controller so we can actually go and have a look at what we've made so far. Okay, so first of all, grab your rock and grass texture or whatever texture you selected and put it in your texture folder like that. Go up to Assets, Import New Asset. Sorry, don't go to Import New Asset. Go to Assets, go to Import Package, and these are the custom Unity packages that already come with Unity 5, and we want to select characters. So again, go to Assets, Import Package, Characters, and then you'll get this screen. Don't mess around with any of this, leave it all ticked and then just press Import. Depending on your computer, how fast it is, older computers will take a bit longer, obviously, to import it, so just be patient. Yours might take a bit longer than mine, or it might be a lot faster than mine. The new first-person controllers in Unity 5 that you can use are really good. I think they're great, and we're not going to bother scripting movement scripts and things like that, because these ones will do just fine for our purposes. Right. So when it comes in, you'll get an editor and the standard assets folder. So double click your standard assets, double click characters, and then double click first person and double click prefabs. And now you'll see these two blue squares here, which are actually called prefabs, which we'll go into later on. You have a first person controller and a rigid body first person controller. I am just going to select the first one, just the first person controller, drag it somewhere onto my scene on the terrain, and just let go. And as you can see, now it's put the controller down there and he's facing that way. That's the way his camera is facing. So if you wanted to just zoom straight into him without trying to navigate all the way in to have a look, as I said before, just come up here, double click on that, and then you'll see him. And as you can see, it doesn't much look like a person, but that doesn't matter. And he's kind of, or she's kind of halfway through the terrain right now. So click on this one here. We want to get the y-axis to go straight up and down, and just lift it up a little bit, just so that it's just above the ground, standing on top of it, like that will do. And what we might also do is, because it's looking left, I kind of want it to be facing, well, roughly forward in this direction. So if you've got your first person controller selected, and then up here in the transform, you will see that the rotation here is all set to 0, and we want to rotate on the Y, so we can just go to there and type in maybe 90 degrees, and now we are facing straight ahead, which is what I want. When you're down here now, because we've already gone into all them folders, to get back to the original starting folder, assets folder, just click assets there, okay? Or you can click it down here on the left, doesn't matter. I just click it there, and then you've got all our folders how they were. As you can see, the first person controller, it has a fair few things on it. It has character controller, it has scripts which enable it to be able to move around. It has an audio source, a rigid body. Yeah, it comes fully equipped and ready to go, which is awesome for us. Right, now what we're going to do is we're going to just quickly go into our game and have a bit of a look. So if you press play up here, you have a play button to go into your game, and you have a pause button. So click play, and as you can see, now we are inside what we've made. We're standing on the grass that we made on the terrain, and now there's our mountains, which, because we have colliders on the terrain, we're not going to fall through. And because we smooth it out a little bit, we can actually climb up it. Okay, so that's awesome. The only problem being now is, as you can see down here, it says there are 2 audio listeners in the scene. Please ensure there's always 1 audio listener scene. Right, click up here, play again to get out of it. The reason why we're getting this message here is because when we started our new scene in Unity, we started with the main camera and we started with the light. The main camera, if you come over here to the inspector, it's got a camera obviously because it's a camera, but underneath here it's got audio listener. Problem being is that when we import our first person controller, if you click this arrow here and open it up, we have a first person character. The first person character is a child of the first person controller, and the first person controller is the parent. We'll go into this in more detail later on. So essentially the first person character is joined to the controller here. That's its parent. But you'll see later on, and we'll explain that a bit more. So these two are attached together. If you click the first person character, you can see that the first person character has a camera as well, and it also has an audio listener. So what we want to do is you can click that arrow to close it up, and click on the main camera, right click and delete it. We don't need it because our first person controller already has a camera. So now when we go into it, we have sound. We have footsteps, and when you run, they speed up, and when we jump, we get some sound. So that's awesome, because you used to have to be able to, you used to have to script all your own footstep scripts and things like that. So it's really good that it's already there for us. As you can see, when I was talking about blending in the text with opacity, you can kind of see that the grass here blends in with the edge of this rock a little bit better than just from the real dark grass straight to the rock. So it just blends in a little bit better. I didn't do a very good job of it to show and explain it, but if you play around with it, you'll be able to blend it in quite nicely. Right, so we'll get back out of here. And I think for the first part of this tutorial series, this will be enough for now. So we might leave it off there, and next time when we come back, we'll add trees and grass, and we'll probably add some water and things like that, and just make our scene look a bit nicer. Okay guys, I hope if you're new to Unity that you learned something, and this helped you a little bit, and hopefully I'll see you next time. So thanks for watching, cheers.